Every year without fail, there seems to be this it camera that everybody's talking about. And this year had a bunch of them. The Fujifilm X106 was released this year. The Nikon ZF was released last year, but it got some popularity this year, which I've reviewed on the channel. I love that camera. But the other camera I see talked about a lot is the Osmo Pocket 3. And it's a camera that I've used for the last year. And it's a camera that I feel like is super versatile. And I do know a lot of like my friends on the YouTube space are using this camera and have been loving this camera. But as photographers in the photography community, I don't think we talk about it a lot in terms of like what it takes to use this camera, how you can use it in your own work, and how versatile it actually is. So I've owned this camera for about a year and I've never actually talked about it. But to be honest, this is the camera I've used the most besides like my photo cameras and the cameras I use for work. This is like the thing I use the most to make not just YouTube videos, but to like run around with my kid, if I'm doing stuff with my family, getting B-roll for things. Like, it's super versatile piece of kit. I hear a lot that this camera is overhyped, but for someone who uses a bunch of cameras all the time on a daily basis, sometimes the name of the game is how something can make my work easier, and nothing has made my work easier than the Osmo Pocket 3 because YouTube is just a hobby. I'm not making very much money from it, to be honest. I just do it for fun. So like, if I can find a tool that makes these videos a lot easier to make and more fun to make, I'm gonna use it. So for the last year or so, I've used this camera for basically all of my YouTube videos and for B-roll. If you watch my Fujifilm X106 video, it was entirely shot on this. For the most part, I guess there's like a handful of like B-roll shots, but the A-roll was shot with this. A lot of the A-roll that I was using when I was out and about, it was all shot on this. If you watched my last video at Disneyland, it was shot on this. So to me, what makes this camera special is how easy it is to use. So if you're not familiar with this camera, this is basically the whole thing. It comes in this little package. If you're not buying like the creator combo, which I highly recommend. I think if you're buying this camera, you should buy the creator combo because it comes with a bunch of accessories that I use all the time. It comes with like a little extra battery grip, a little tripod. I think it comes with the regular one, and the DJI Mic 2, which I also used in a majority of my videos. It's a great microphone, 32-bit float, especially with audio because I don't like to mess with audio a whole bunch if I don't have to. So if you just buy the camera by itself, it's just basically this. If you want to shoot, you pick it up, you turn it on, and you're ready to go. So like, it's super easy to actually use. There's a bunch of different features that this camera comes with that I honestly never use. So if you're a photographer who just wants a really good video camera that's really easy to use, this is basically all I would recommend, to be honest, especially if you're trying to start a YouTube channel. This and the Mic 2, basically that's all you need to get very good looking video. Like, for example, I used to use action cameras to record a lot of my POV stuff, and I used to do POV style videos, and they were great and all, but I was always like a little bit disappointed with the image quality. And as a videographer, image quality is something I always notice. Not necessarily that I think it's important, but for me specifically for me as a person, it's something I like to shoot. I like to shoot nice looking video, and the Osmo Pocket 3 gives me that, while still, again, making things really, really small. So when I hear people say, oh, this camera is overhyped or it's not as good as people say it is, I think honestly, by just changing a couple of settings, it solves a lot of problems that people have with the image, like looking overly sharp or not really liking the colors, or maybe the exposure is off for them. So I do want to give a couple tips that I basically changed for this on my Pocket 3 to give me really good video, and it's basically all I did to it. I don't do a whole bunch to the image besides these two settings. Basically all I did to it is enable D-Log, which I think is super important if you're trying to get really nice quality video, because it kind of does extend the dynamic range and you get a little more depth to your color, and you get more options to actually play around with the color if you want to. And the other thing is just everything is on auto white balance, auto exposure. The only thing I do change for the exposure compensation to -0.3, which I think adds on to a lot to be able to get a more pleasing highlight roll off, because I'm used to a lot of my older cameras to not have the best dynamic range. So my tip for you guys is, if you're shooting with an older camera or a camera that's not super reliable with auto exposure, just lower the exposure in camera by a tiny bit. A third of a stop usually does the trick for me, that's done the trick for this. And it's basically how I leave it on all the time. One thing I don't like about shooting log on this is that it doesn't have like a corrective LUT that you can see. So when you're looking at this, the image is flat. So if you're not used to that, it can be a little jarring, and you kind of have to trust that the camera is doing the work for you. And out of the year I've been using it, it's never been an issue. It's something I had to kind of get used to it and train my eye that, oh yeah, this it's gonna look flat until I correct it, and it's not something I can really meter for. But this camera is competent enough that you can just let it, as long as you trust it to do its thing, it usually does the job. And for me, it's never disappointed me. Like, this camera has a bunch of pro features. So if you're in a videographer, you get a bunch of options. But if you don't want to use any of that, this is perfectly capable on its own by just letting it do its thing. Just changing the color to D-Log and playing around with the exposure a little bit goes a heck of a long way. And to be honest, when I started my YouTube channel, I started using action cameras just because I wanted things to be a little bit easier, but none of it actually looked exactly how I wanted it. And I kind of started feeling like, well, if I really want something to look a certain way, I'll just use bigger cameras. But this has been a nice bridge between like my professional kit and like a smartphone. I don't really use action cameras anymore for that specific reason. So this is basically all I take if I'm planning on shooting like a small segment for a YouTube video, or I'm just planning on shooting video at all. I just take this with me, I put it in my bag. That's basically all I take. And then I have a dedicated stills camera, which they rotate all the time. Most of the time it's the Leica Q2 or the Nikon ZF. So the Nikon ZF or Leica Q2, and this is basically all I need. And I basically never shoot video on anything bigger than this, besides like my Sony a7 IV here in my office for my YouTube channel, or like my other bigger cameras for when I do weddings and engagement shoots and all that kind of stuff. And speaking of professional work, I use this camera a lot, but not like, I'm not trying to like sell you like, oh, this is the next thing for your wedding videography, but it's a very nice addition to have. The only time I ever use this camera is if I want to get like a time lapse during a wedding shoot, and like I just plop it on a, basically, and I have it right here. I plop it on this, basically a selfie stick. I put it on this, and then I just let it do its thing for about an hour, and I always get something that I'm at least a little bit happy with, because again, I'm not super familiar with time lapses, but it's easy enough to where I can get some nice transitions for my wedding films, and it's something that I use basically all the time. Another thing I really like about this camera that I use all the time is a tracking feature, especially if I'm out and about. It's really nice to be able to get different kinds of shots, especially if I'm just talking to the camera. I used it when I went to Mexico. I stuck it on a flagpole and I was walking around and talking. I used it at Disneyland. I was also doing the same thing. I love that it's so small, so I use a small magnetic mount that I stick to things, and I just let it do its thing. It's small enough where people don't really notice that it's there, and so it makes me feel a little bit less self-conscious about talking to a camera, and it allows me to get better shots. So for me, who does YouTube stuff for fun, being able to like have fun while making the videos goes a long way. Honestly, the battery life in this is more than good enough. I never shoot a whole bunch back to back. I've shot like up to an hour with this, and I never run out of battery. If you get the creator combo, you get like a battery bank like attachment that just goes right on here, and it adds a bunch of battery to it. It makes the whole kit a little bit bigger, but it doesn't add a lot to the kit as it is. And you also get like one of these like little tripod mounts, which this lives with on my camera most of the time. So like, you know, it's not super big, and basically all it is, it adds a threaded mount here, so you can add it. You can use this with a tripod. You can add a bunch of different attachments to it. But honestly, for me, I'm not trying to sell you anything, and this is basically the way I use it 98% of the time. Sometimes I put it on a tripod if I want to put it somewhere that's higher, but other than that, like basically this Insta360 selfie stick, that's basically all I put on here. And you know, it becomes a lot bigger, but suddenly you can like extend it and you can put it somewhere. This is usually how I stick it to things, or how I set it at weddings. I just put it on a selfie stick, plop it somewhere, and I get really nice time lapses. So this is an easy recommend from me if you're a photographer if you're a videographer, if you're an enthusiast, you want to have nice quality video for your family, anything like that. I think this is an easy pickup. I think it's super versatile, and I'm not going to try to sell you any accessories because I never even use accessories. I have some ND filters I use sporadically if I'm shooting it for a job, but if I'm shooting for YouTube, I never even use them. So I don't think they're necessarily necessary, but it is nice that they have them and that they're magnetic. Like for example, this combo comes with like a wide angle lens, and it's magnetic, so like you just put it right on it and it's suddenly you have a wide angle view of everything. So yeah, having a magnetic mount is super useful, but I never use it. So but if you're someone who likes to have the most flexibility and the most control over your image, there's a bunch of accessories out there, but honestly I think anyone can benefit from having a kit like this, especially again something this small. So thank you so much for watching this week's video. If you have any questions about the Osmo Pocket 3, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.